This building was supposed to be where the story started. It wasn't the school. It wasn't the place from the first video. It was older than all of them. And somehow, it still had room 207. This is probably the last video in this arc. Not the last abandoned place video, but the last one about Eastview. Because after finding the records, the repeated number, and the connection between the buildings, I knew there was one place left to check. The original Eastview Administration and Intake Center. That name alone made the place feel different. Not a school, not a normal office, an intake center. A place where people were brought in before being sent somewhere else. When I got there, the building looked smaller than the school, but somehow worse. The windows were boarded, the front steps were cracked, there were old fencing around part of it, and the whole place looked like it had been forgotten on purpose, not just abandoned, hidden. Inside, it didn't look like a school. It looked like an office building that had been left to rot. Old reception windows, broken chairs, filing cabinets, papers stuck to the floor from water damage, and smell that old abandoned buildings have. Dust, mold, wet wood, and time. The front desk still had papers behind it. Most of them were destroyed, but there were folders, old forms, labels I couldn't fully read. One drawer was open, and inside there was a file tab with the number I already knew I was going to find, 207. The hallway behind the front desk had rooms on both sides. Not classrooms, interview rooms, observation rooms, storage. At least, that's what the sign said. But the deeper I went, the more the building started feeling familiar. The green lower walls, the peeling paint, the broken ceiling, the same layout. It felt like every building I had visited was copying this one. There was one room with writing all over the wall. At first, I thought it was graffiti, but it didn't look random. It looked like names. Some were scratched into the paint, some were written in marker, some were almost completely faded. And near the center, someone had drawn the symbol, the circle with the line through it. Underneath it, there was one sentence. They moved us through '07. That line changed everything, because maybe 207 wasn't just a room. Maybe it was a process, a group, a case, a way of marking people. I don't know, but I know it mattered to whoever wrote that message, and I know they wanted someone to see it. Eventually, I found what looked like a record room. Filing cabinets were knocked over, folders were scattered everywhere, most of the papers were unreadable, but Bob was still on a shelf. It had the Eastview name on it, and written on the side in black marker was 207. Inside the box, there was an old photo. It looked like a group picture. Students, staff, maybe both, but one face had been scratched out. Not torn, scratched, like someone wanted that person removed. On the back of the photo, there was a date, and underneath it, one phrase, before the room was sealed. I didn't expect to find an actual door 207 in that building, but I did. It was at the end of a side hallway. The sign looked newer than the others, like it had been replaced at some point. That bothered me, because why would an old intake center have a room number 207 in the same way as the school? I stood there for a while before I opened it. Inside, the room was almost empty. There was one chair, one metal desk, and papers all over the floor. No monster, no figure, no loud noise, just silence. And somehow, that was worse. Because it felt like the room didn't need to scare me. It already knew I understood. On the desk, there was one file. I know how that sounds. Too perfect. Too convenient. But that's what was there. The folder was damaged, but the label was clear. Case 207. Most of the pages were ruined, but one line was readable. Subject repeatedly appears in locations connected to Eastview after closure. I read that line one more than once. After closure, that meant people saw something after the buildings were already abandoned, long before I even went there. When I left room 207, the hallway felt different. I know I keep saying that, but it did. The building felt awake. I looked down the hall and saw something standing near the far end. I didn't run away. I just stood there, because part of me already knew what it was. The same shape, the one from the photos, the one from the doorways, the one from the mirror. I left after that. I didn't yell. I didn't try to talk to it. I didn't go closer. I just left. And when I got outside, I realized something. I wasn't scared in the same way anymore. I was still scared, but now I understood that these places weren't just creepy because they were abandoned. They were creepy because something happened there, and people forgot, or they tried to. So this is where I'm ending the Eastview arc. I don't even have an answer, or every answer. I don't know exactly what case 207 was. I don't know who the figure is, and I don't know why it started showing up in my photos. But I know the buildings were connected. I know that number mattered. And I know the story didn't start with me. I just found what was left of it. But I'm done all this. I thought I'd be. Finding where it started would make me want to stop. But it actually made me feel opposite. Abandoned places aren't just empty buildings. They're leftovers of people, secrets, of things nobody wanted to talk about. So I'm going to keep exploring. Not because I'm trying to chase whatever was in those photos, and not because I think every abandoned place is haunted, but because some places still have stories in them. And if nobody looks, those stories stay buried. So yeah, I'll keep. But from now on, I'm paying attention to every number, every symbol, every doorway, and every shadow.